Today's video summary is I wanted to draw a sexy ghost girl, but I didn't want YouTube to get mad at me for nudity. So I made a just moderately very attractive ghost girl that is clothed. So with that being said, hi, hello. If you're new here, my name is Rain. If you're not new here, welcome back. I really appreciate you stopping on by to my little corner of the internet. And we will be doing the ghost prompt and then just a witch doodle of my OC for Drawtober, Inktober for the spooky season. Screw the tobers for the spooky vibes. And so if you want to get creative alongside me in today's video, I would really appreciate you sharing some information about it down below. If you want to tag me so I could support you like you guys are supporting me, feel free to do so, or share it to my private messaging systems on Instagram and things like that. I'm always happy to see what you guys create alongside me. It's the beauty of the little art corner. So all of that aside, let's get chatting about the actual kind of theme for today. Future Rain popping in really quickly to ask that if you have the time, I would really appreciate it if you watch all the way through to the end of this video or skip at least there to see the final spread. So back to the video. First and foremost, I think I've talked about Eris, my OC, being kind of a witchy character, you know, being the reincarnate / possessed zombified version of the Greek goddess of chaos. She's a bit of a goblin character, to be fair, and a bit more on the kind of witchy side in terms of her powers regarding most of my original characters. Vivian is very science-oriented and more so just mixes his own chemicals for things like that. Kind of like magic meet alchemy. It's basically alchemy. He's an alchemist. That's the best way to describe him. Nameless being a kind of plant-based power zombie character, and then Eris kind of having your more classic wizard, witch, sorceress type energy in terms of her magic. Maybe elemental, maybe leaning something a bit more dark. Not entirely sure how her magic works. I have not built a perfect magic system yet, but I think she's super cute as like a character for starting to design some witchy outfits for. I feel like as a character, she doesn't really want to play into a whole lot of stereotypes, but would have a lot of fun here and there, dressing up and kind of embodying the stereotypical kind of witch personification. I feel like they'd have a lot of fun with that type of attitude, and that they would really not mind playing up the bit as a character. You know, think of them as kind of like a chaotic neutral kind of existence, so they thrive on being a bit mischievous or circumventing kind of expectations, going against what people might think. So very much the type of character to, one, dress up as their stereotype, then do the exact opposite, or because they very much don't actually behave in that classical witch type of way that would be indicative of the outfit, dressing it up to kind of make a mockery of the stereotypes of themselves, just to go around and be a menace and harass people by doing classic witch stuff, just to be a total pain in everyone's butts. Just absolute nightmare material. Very much that sort of character in terms of energy. Think Murphy's Law meets toddler brain in a grown, fully aware woman's body. Like, that's the character. That's the energy that they give off, they embody. That's kind of their philosophy. And they kind of have that idea of there's no point in kind of trying to oppose my own destiny, being the reincarnate of Eris, the Greek goddess, god of chaos. They don't see much of a point in trying to oppose that destiny that's been set out for them, that type of label that's been assigned, that they are a creature whose powers are based within chaos and kind of just being a miserable pain in everyone's butts. Like, kind of, I don't want to say chaotic neutrality, but kind of they rely more on creating natural chaos around natural events like hurricanes, thunder, things like that, and kind of making everything to the extreme, but things that are more naturally occurring. They don't go out of their way to create situations that are particularly elaborate. They take pre-existing, likely to occur situations and make them as miserable and awful as physically possible, right? So, as a character, they don't really want to oppose that. They rather would embrace it, kind of. And so they kind of fall into the stereotype of chaos, but they don't mean ill when they kind of engage in these not so nice behaviors. But with that, I thought it'd be really fun to try and think of how Eris's natural style would be incorporated into a witch outfit, kind of what elements she might be interested in, what she might go for. And this is a pretty non-serious, non-committal sketch, basic sketchbook type of day. And so the proportions aren't super 100%. I'm mostly just having fun, sketching out a little outfit for them, thinking about what elements they might enjoy so that I can make a bigger, more elaborate illustration in the future for them. Thinking like maybe my Moonlit Conservatory, my Literature Ablaze illustration that I always reference for Eris. That one kind of energy, like a close-up, maybe a bookshelf type background thing, library, maybe the destruction and ruins of something that they've done that they probably shouldn't have done. But I want to do something bigger and more elaborate. This is kind of just laying down the initial idea, not in a thumbnail fashion, right? Like the pose isn't super important. It's just kind of thinking out the actual design elements is something that I'll be cleaning up in the future. Probably in a month where people don't want to watch spooky season stuff, but that's an aside. And then later I get to my little ghost character that I'm super in love with. It's probably Nameless's Halloween costume. Spoilers, but they're super adorable. So, I mean, I kind of put a little bit of effort into the anatomy and kind of trying to get things looking kind of normal, but the illustration is mostly supposed to be fun, a sketchbook session kind of way of unwinding, so it's mostly going to be kind of talking about how the elements are indicative of what Eris as a character kind of values, and how they will still kind of seek to present themselves authentically even when they're playing up a bit and maybe over-exaggerating or trying to deceive somebody to get her kind of, I don't want to say get their way, but to like get by, right? Mischief kind of energy. Not necessarily having ill will, but would definitely dress up in classic witch attire to attend some sort of party to get information and gossip and just be a little goblin, even though they would never be invited or allowed in any other circumstances. And then something probably blew up, to be honest, but that's an aside. Definitely an illustration or little comic for the future, but they're just such a fun character. I love my OC Eris so much, and so I mostly also just want to spend more time with them as a character and get to kind of enjoy them a little bit more than I have been recently as well. So for long-time viewers, I just really quickly want to address something super quickly, which in my universe means it's going to be another like 2 minutes, but that's an aside. I did put up a poll last week which asked if I should change my channel name to have illustration in the title so that people who are kind of passing by my channel a little bit more casually will have a better idea of what to expect from me as a creator, as somebody whom you kind of just encounter naturally in the wild, things like that. And so I now have the official name on YouTube, Dismal Rain Illustration, but I still am taggable by Dismal Rain as I was before. And that was basically just so that I could be a little bit easier for people to understand. I realized that, like, in terms of making myself presentable to people in a way that they will feel, like, comfortable in my environment, I probably should state what I am when I have a name that can be kind of taken as a bit more depressing, or like, here is a 5-hour playlist of really sad rain sounds for you to listen to when you're feeling down. Because that is kind of what my channel name might indicate to people who don't know my story, why I have the channel name I have, why I kind of exists the way I do, which I am thinking about doing a meet the artist type of video where I do an updated self-portrait with some information about me that might make it so that people feel a little bit more personalized to the name, since it has been a while since I've actually fully discussed it on my channel. So with that, I just wanted to state that it is just a slight change. My name is basically the same, but it was basically to help people know what I stand for, which is art creation, art content, and stuff like that. So I hope no one minds too much. My name is very personal and special to me, and so I just wanted to say that, and also thank everybody for voting in the poll and helping me make my decision. It wasn't actually super far off. It was like 54 to 46 last I checked, but I still really appreciate it and kind of the dedication. So thank you, and I'm gonna try to do like polls and community post weekly just to, show up and kind of create a space for people to talk about art outside of just my immediate videos as well. So, that's kind of my obligatory weekly channel update. I still haven't made a decision on if I'm going to move my uploads to Sunday or not, so that might come in the future, but for now, that's all that's changed since last week, and thank you so much, everybody. So back to the topic at hand. I wouldn't say that Eris leans in a masculine direction in terms of their characterization by any means. However, they do have kind of shorter, fluffier hair and kind of a more gender neutral approach to themselves. They use kind of she, they pronouns for no reason other than the fact that really I kind of live by the philosophy that most Greek gods who aren't among the main 12 and have some form of godly ability that's really strongly related to a gender role that is assigned to them. Like if you're, for example, like Hera being the goddess of like family, and is she the family or the goddess of childbirth as well? Things like that. And then being tied to a more motherly role and her always being depicted as a female, that's where I kind of have my kind of cautions around gender neutrality, because it's a little bit more strongly tied to their character and then what their ability is. Goddesses like Artemis, who's very much a sworn virgin hunter goddess, I don't mess with or kind of touch her kind of gender identity at all. But when it comes to gods and goddesses who aren't depicted as often, talked about as thoroughly and stuff like that, I generally lean towards a gender neutral or gender fluid approach, just because while it's not as common in Greek mythology as it is in Norse mythology, I think from what I kind of just generally encounter, a more like neutral opinion of sex, gender, sexuality, and all of that, I generally like to think that gods would not force themselves to maintain a particular role and exist within gender stereotypes. So Eris as a character kind of embodies that as well. They lean more feminine, but they exist very neutrally, feeling about kind of what they are. I don't even know that Eris knows what they are, to be honest. I don't think Eris really realizes who they were that much before they passed away and became Eris incarnate. And I think that as a character, that creates a lot of detachment to an identity, right? Who you were before you became basically the shell that a goddess's kind of existence shares, like Eris exists somewhere in there, but early on in their character, their kind of existence, and their story, they are more they're more Eris than Eris. They're more the god of chaos than they are Eris, the individual they were when they were still alive, because they have to kind of rediscover themselves through finding their old memories and relocating parts of their life that were lost to passing away and having that kind of afterlife. So they kind of start off a lot more like the god of chaos, and then rediscover that kind of who they were and then how that is balanced with who they have become now. And so as a character, I do dress them a bit more femininely. However, I think that they're very comfortable kind of approaching different ideas, different concepts of how they present themselves, and I think that they kind of lean towards more masculine stereotypes and presentations in most things aside from dress. Things like mannerisms, kind of social behaviors, and how they engage with things, I think fall towards a more stereotypically masculine kind of line. And thus, I also wanted to try and think of them outside that kind of box that I've kind of put them in, kind of more the more masculine presentation, and assign a daintier kind of pose to them to see how I felt about it, to see how I felt about Eris kind of existing in a more classically feminine pose. And let me just be like abundantly clear here. When I say kind of stereotypically, I don't really personally believe that most of these things are in any way kind of relevant or set in stone. But when it comes to articulating the way that I'm trying to kind of deconstruct my own character and figure out how they exist, because I think as an artist, when you've had a character for long enough, they almost take on a life of their own. And well, or at least for me, I mean, maybe this doesn't happen as much for other people, but once I've had a character for a while, it feels more like an old friend that you've had and not something that you've created. And with that, I find that sometimes Eris just doesn't really, I don't even know things about Eris that I should as their creator. And the way I usually approach figuring that out is by drawing them in the situation or trying to explore their character through how I feel about that said environment kind of occurring, right? And so I wanted to approach some more classically feminine things in this drawing to kind of explore them as a character and see if I feel like it encapsulates who they are and it's something that they would do for something other than a skit, or some sort of task, job at hand, investigation that they need to do, right? And so the classically feminine pose felt very cute on them as a character, but very not them. And so I think when I approach doing this again in the future, their witch fit in a more kind of finalized illustration approach, I need to do something a bit more body, kind of out there, spontaneous, and quote-unquote unladylike in terms of how it presents to a viewer, because this kind of daintiness just doesn't really, daintiness in this situation doesn't really feel indicative of Eris's character. It doesn't feel like something that they would actually do or enjoy doing unless they had to. And that was a very fun part of this kind of experience. This whole kind of, I don't even know how to describe it because I'm really bad at these types of things. Like, I just kind of put people in any pose that I want and I don't really think about it. But very cutesy, maybe is the correct word. Like, the outfit feels kind of appropriate. It doesn't start as kind of them as it gets, but in terms of like the cocked leg, the off balance, the dainty hand, the passive splayed hand at their side thing, it just doesn't feel as self-assured in an intense I will punch you kind of way that it needs to be. Eris is kind of more out there, spontaneous, intimidating, generally, kind of a socially out there, unabashed and unapologetic sort of character in how they exist. And with that, I feel like this is taking up too little space in a way that is not self-assured enough. And that feels really hard to articulate, and I'm not sure I'm doing it as well as I want to, but I think Eris would do this type of attire more in a I'm about to step on your face and you should thank me for it sort of way. And that's something that I found very enjoyable to explore with them as a character, that I don't think they are very dainty and feminine in the way that they carry themselves. I think they're a bit more rough, maybe even like unbalanced, coordinated, kind of disregarding of other people around them. They're the type of person whom I think would accidentally like nail me with a backpack walking down a school hallway and not even realize it happened. Very aloof and unaware of themselves and how much space they take up, but confident in that type of kind of mindset and way of existing. And that was really fun. I'm also very small, so it's particularly easy to nail me in a hallway and not realize it. So I think they're more aware of people more their size and larger. She's about 5'6", 5'7" as a character. So, you know, people who are very short like me are kind of kind of non-existent to people like her, right? And that's something that I think was very fun to explore as her character through doing the opposite, right? And I think it even gave me a better awareness of how they carry themselves than if I had tried to illustrate the more accurate and kind of already known way of existing, if that kind of makes sense, I hope. But by experimenting with this kind of opposite approach to how she presents herself, almost gave me a better understanding of where she actually lies within the spectrum and how her personality kind of actually presents itself, which I think I need to do more, kind of forcing myself to almost leave my own comfort zone by drawing my characters out of what is what I innately think to be them, almost gives me a better idea of who they are than kind of recreating what I already know they would do, right? Already know is natural to them in the perception I have for their character. And so I think I just need to do a lot of alternative universe fan art of my own OCs in different worlds. You know, give them Baldur's Gate personas or something like that. Which would be really fun. Which would be more fun. What would be more fun is drawing like Baldur's Gate, Death Note characters, things like that in my universe, and see just how weird the magic system could get if I were to approach developing it through the perception of how other characters' magic would exist within the world. That's a terrible idea. I'm probably going to do it one day because it's just going to be a mess, but that's kind of an aside. But I think that I want to spend more time kind of existing in my sketchbook casually, thinking through what I already know about characters and just kind of free drawing. Free drawing effectively being the secret long-term topic of today's video, but basically, as somebody who has an art style and is aware of how they got to their art style, I'm now in a point artistically where I want to not necessarily curate it, but actually verify that I'm happy with it, right? And that I'm happy with the art I create, the way I create it, and all of those facets. And so I think the first step to doing that is to work on free drawing, right? Free drawing being kind of drawing the immediate thing that comes from the imagination, working on setting aside time to see what comes so naturally to me as somebody who has now been drawing for a long enough time that I've developed an art style that I can begin to see what is innate to me when I have no preconceived notions of what I'm going to create, which isn't possible for every artist. If you have that condition, I think it's called aphantasia, where you can't picture things in your mind, this isn't very possible. However, I'm not entirely sure. I'm very interested in the topic, but I'm not entirely certain off the top of my head how much art style development occurs when you have a condition like that, and how developing one goes. That's something that's very much out of my expertise because I don't have it. And all of the artists I follow with the condition are realist artists and portrait artists. So I don't know if that's just generally where those artists go towards realism because you can look at it and directly visualize it, or if there's a different process that happens mentally for putting it down onto paper from there. I'm genuinely not aware. And I will be doing some research into it at a later date because I think it could be very interesting for making a character and kind of exploring more things within my kind of condition series. I don't know if it constitutes as a disability. I'm genuinely not certain. I fathom that it can have real big impacts on learning certain topics and school performance, and therefore would fall under the category, at least on an academic level, but I'm just genuinely not aware. As somebody who works in education, I've never had a student with it, right? And because of that, I'm not entirely sure how it's like approached in education, but I want to, with my kind of series, touch on conditions that I don't have to at least force myself and others to kind of sit down and learn about things we don't know that still impact my community, right? And impact others in the world, right? Not everybody who watches my channel has a chronic illness, a disability, a mental illness, but people who have disabilities and are mentally ill are in my community, and I owe them some level of representation as somebody who prides themselves on being ready to kind of explore and help uplift parts of my community that don't necessarily apply to me. So I'm gonna research it some more because I do want to work on an illustration for it, find a way to create something that others could see themselves in, or at least for the sake of having a really well-balanced channel and well-balanced approach to creating this representation, at least find artists whom I can refer people to who create art that have the condition, or have the condition and create art about the condition that I can refer people to, so that I'm creating as much community in that regard as possible. However, kind of aside now, free drawing is something that I am going to start putting more time into on my channel. I'm thinking once a month. This is not falling into the channel update category because this is about actual art development, artistic development, style development, not content creation as an artist, right? This isn't about me having a YouTube channel or art YouTube or ArtTube or anything like that. This is about actually developing my style as an artist that has now, not now, this isn't new for me, but who has a style, right? Because I think that there is something to be said about the art you create when you don't have expectations for yourself, and it is the thing that comes most naturally to you. Now, this is not saying that you shouldn't create art with references. You shouldn't have ideas of what you want to create or anything like that. I believe references are fundamentally important to being a good artist for the overwhelming majority of artists. And I believe that you should have an idea of composition and how you want to approach a drawing at least some of the time. I don't think that you have to. I don't think that that is necessary to be an artist all the time, that you have to have a plan, that you need a thumbnail to make a plan. But when you know what you create, you have a way that comes naturally to you. Like when you have a style, your art comes naturally to you in a sense. Well, you might be frustrated learning a new pose or a new concept or something like that. The way you draw, the art that comes naturally to you is still a component. The muscle memory is built. I draw eyes the same way. I draw hands generally the same way. The way I do proportions, that's all something that I understand and is innate to me. Now I need to apply other aspects to my basic style, right? And so I want to work on free drawing and creating things from memory, from the imagination completely, without a reference, so that I can now explore the kind of inner workings of my mind and my perception of art to then be able to create better art with intention, right? What I create unintentionally without any end goal whilst I'm free drawing is something that I can use to then actually apply my already existing understanding of art to when I sit down and I find it, right? And I don't know that it's going to work, but that's another part of being an artist a lot of the time, is exploring how you create art, exploring what art means to you, and exploring how you want to approach continuing to create art, right? Because there is no one way. And as somebody who was mostly self-taught when learning art, then went to a college, took some art classes, then decided to get an art degree, and is now in an MFA, I really want to continue to not think about art as something that exists within education. I want to continue treating art as if I'm still in the self-taught community of art creators, right? Because I was self-taught, then I went to school, and now I'm in an MFA. An MFA is basically just being a self-taught artist with people to occasionally critique you. That's like the nicest way to describe it. I don't know if all MFA programs are like this, if it's just my MFA, but I'm out of school. Well, I'm not out of school. I'm virtual. I literally live in a completely different time zone than my college, but I see a professor once a week, a different one each time, and they say, I like this, I don't like this, but for the most part, they say, I think you should continue pushing these ideas. I think that this is a good place for you to continue going. My MFA feels more like a professional development class that is never ending than it feels like art critique and art improvement. I'm basically acting as somebody who is self-taught with a personalized search bar that is in my email, basically. If I have a question about art, instead of Googling it, basically I just email one of the professors that specializes in it, and then they answer my question with a slightly curated edge based on what they know of my existing work, right? But that's kind of what it is, and it's weird to articulate out loud because it sounds very much like a waste of money and that kind of environment, and in a sense, for a lot of people it is. You know, I want to be a college art professor on the more kind of like foundational level, and that's something you need a master's for. You know, I want to teach scientific illustration and all of those sorts of things, and so because of that, I need this degree. But I don't really know that it's worth it for everybody. And that is something that I'm going to have to explore more when I finish my MFA, if I really felt like the educational component of it was necessary to be where I want to be artistically, which I don't think the answer will be yes, but you know, there's time to come, there's years for that to happen. But I want to continue treating myself as if I'm self-taught, right? I want to continue relying on myself and what I understand as ways to improve, and not rely on the people I have temporarily, per se. I want to use their knowledge base to continue to grow, but when it comes to the actual way that I practice art, I want to act as if they're not there. And one thing that I've seen people recommend trying for people, at least in my kind of realm of art creation, which is character design, character development, things like that, is kind of doing a more free drawing approach, where you just let it happen. You don't pull up a reference, you see what you create, and then from there you work kind of backwards to see what you can do with what you did, right? What came innately to you. Now, what do you do when you apply deliberate, intentional information to it? How do you fix it? How do you recover it? And things like that. And I'm really excited to kind of approach setting down at least once a month to just fill up a large piece of paper with free drawings, or maybe throughout the month and do it like a vlog style, to not just document for you guys as people who consume my content and like to sit here and talk with me, but I want to do it for myself as well, because I think that it's necessary for some creators of art, not YouTube, to document that kind of process so that they can look back on it and remember their mindset and where they were, and then see how it's shifted with time, which I think is a large part of the free drawing process, is being able to recognize where you are, where you were, where you are, what happened in between, and then how do you use that to improve your creations, right? And this is something that I think is going to be very important for me as a artist to continue growing and actually figuring out exactly where my place in the world is artistically beyond my disability series, right? Because my disability is always going to be there. It's never going to change. Well, I might get another one, but there might be a condition one day that gets discovered and it better describes my situation. But aside from that, it's never going to go away, and I'm never going to stop creating work that creates catharsis for people in my community, because it's part of creating catharsis for myself. Having safety, security, reassurance that I'm valuable despite it, right? But I need to now spend a lot more time figuring out who I am beyond that artistically. I've made enough in the series that I feel like I'm safe now, if that makes sense. I feel like I've started to make progress in my mission, and now I can continue to figure out what else speaks to me artistically beyond just drawing cute girls and disability work. And maybe the only thing that I'll free draw are cute girls and disability work, and that'll be enough for me to understand where I am as a creator and what is just exclusively my interest. But I want to try and let my brain do the working. I want to try and let my imagination speak for itself so that I can put things to paper that I would never otherwise have the confidence to put to paper, which is something that I've realized I've been holding myself back by doing. By not creating space for myself, to basically document the things that come to mind when I'm thinking about the universes my characters live in, or kind of when I have an idea for something that I think would be cool, but I don't actually do it because I'm like, that's not the type of art I create, be it a creature or some sort of mystical plant thing that just kind of, I think would look cool in the universes my characters live in. By letting myself believe that that's not the type of art I create, or the type of art that interests me, it's just a cool idea, I'm not allowing myself to see if I can be that artist, but I'm also not allowing myself to develop the universes my characters fundamentally live in. Now, I don't think every artist needs to be completely well-versed. I don't think that every character needs to have a diverse skill set. I don't think every artist needs to go through this process at all. But it's a process that I want to go through. And it's a process that I think will help me create the best work. For people whom just are happy drawing exclusively the thing that they draw, that's great. And I think those people feel very settled in their art and what they make and have found themselves in a way that I haven't yet, right? People whom are like Lowish or Feeful or Lord Gris, they're people whom have been creating art a lot longer than me, and they have found a security in their style and the art they create that I haven't quite found yet. Now, I think I'm secure in my style, at least right now. I'm happy with how my art looks when I create it, and I don't feel any innate push to try and improve something to a degree where my style would fundamentally change. However, I think that I need to now explore myself as an artist, like a person who's an artist, and not the actual, visual component, I like my disability work. I'm very comfortable and I'm confident in it and I'm happy with how it turns out. But I know for a fact that that is not the exclusivity. That is not exclusively what I want to create, I plan to create. I make other stuff, obviously. I don't think I've made a video about anything in that kind of universe in a month or two now, but when I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about it, I'm like, what else can I create? Can I push myself further? Can I find niches and components of art that I've never considered allowing myself to do? For all the love that I have of scientific illustration, I've never actually forced myself to see just how far I can push the concept of scientific illustration, right? And I'm not necessarily a huge fan of modernist ideas when it comes to art. I'm not a huge fan of modern art as like quote unquote modern art, like big art, not like art within today. I love my co-artists, my fellow artists, the people of my community that are living today. I love that, right? I love artists that are living, but I don't like modern art as like a movement, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not a huge fan of cubism, but like cubic art was not the only art made when cubism was a thing, if that makes sense, right? And so it's like, I do like the idea of modern art, though, that we need to now push boundaries further than we have before. And I don't think that that has to be like a huge societal thing. I believe that pushing boundaries can just be pushing your boundaries, pushing your understanding of things, and pushing how you conceptualize information, perceive the world, perceive things, and just expanding your imagination and creativity that way. I don't think that we as artists need to have this massive, broad societal understanding or this incredibly extensive knowledge about this one particular thing that we can make all of our art challenging, which I know can be not on the kind of YouTube art sphere as much, I don't think, but I know in the art with a capital A world, that can be a really kind of controversial opinion, this idea that artists don't have to have some massive ulterior kind of messaging in their art, and that we're capable of, like with my ghost girl, just wanting to draw pretty, sexy women. Like, we could do that. Like, that could be the only thing we want to do. And that's okay, right? And, you know, I like to touch and dabble in both worlds. I like to do something that I feel is very meaningful and powerful based on my experience, which is my health-related art. But I also just want to draw pretty women and effeminate men and pretty men, pretty boys, pretty women, pretty people. Like, that's all I want to do, right? Like, in some capacity. Now is my chance to, as an artist, because one, I have conquered art block. I have done it. For now. It's going to come back. Probably in December. I can feel it. I can feel it in my core, right? But I've temporarily conquered art block. And now is where I want to push myself to explore things as much as possible and diversify my art, especially for art block related reasons. Because if I can not make myself because I want to do it, so I'm not really forcing myself like the word make would imply, but if I can set aside this like extra large piece of paper so that I can just sit down every other couple of days and just draw whatever without even thinking, don't even turn on my brain, just let the pen touch the paper and go. Try and capture what I'm seeing in my mind's eye. That not only sounds empowering and incredibly freeing, but it sounds like a way to make sure that I don't get stuck in these ideals of how I'm supposed to be performing again, and avoid getting stuck in this kind of realm where I'm putting expectations on myself that are unnecessary or allowing anxiety, whether I'm realizing it or not, to get the better of my art creation process. And by that I mean art block, right? Art block's always going to happen, but if I can create low stakes and a diverse kind of segment for an ability and a space to create art where it's just what is happening in my brain, maybe I can avoid burning myself out or creating frustrations with how my art is going, because I'm actively incorporating something into my art routine that is creating a new situation, a new experience, something else that is happening that isn't strict, right? Like, I don't know that I know how to articulate this yet. And I think it's something that I'll uncover more and better when I start this, which I think I'm going to just start right on November 1st, probably. Just put a piece of paper at my desk, maybe even just under my desk mat, and just let it happen. And if I spill my coffee on it, that's just gonna be part of it, you know? We'll see. Just let everything just kind of flow and see how it goes. And it's something I'm really excited for. And I think it's going to kind of help me feel more secure and settled, because I'll now have something more low stakes in my art and kind of just casually in my art life, right? And I think that that might be one of the downsides of creating on the internet and sharing my art because you need to have a strict schedule a lot of the time for people to see what you create. And that's not the people not wanting to consume it, it's the algorithm of the platform wanting consistency. And sometimes I feel like maybe I'm simply not creating quality enough work to make people feel inspired by my art the way I want them to. And I think I've kind of allowed that to just exist in me. And I haven't even really realized it until I'm sitting here and I just sketched what I really just felt like doing, even though I kind of know that the first sketch isn't up to par with how I wanted it to look. And my messaging of the video isn't like my one where I titled it Bad Art Weeks Happen, you know? I'm just satisfied with the fact that I'm really realigning myself with my value that artists need to be authentic in showing the type of art they create, the good and the bad, so that people can have a better understanding. Now, I would like to be very clear after I said that because I think I'm easy to confuse. I'm not saying these pieces are bad. I think they actually turned out really good, all things considered. But I need to allow myself to be open with the idea that I'm not always going to think that what I created is of value, but it'll still have value. Does that make sense? I don't even know. I feel like I'm not the most cohesive and well thought out individual, and so sometimes I find that it's hard to explain what is happening in my head, and that's all the more reason for more free drawing in my life, because maybe if I take the time to create visuals, whether they're abstract or not, to be associated with the thoughts that are actively existing in my head, maybe then I'll be able to kind of align myself better with these ideas and these notions that are existing in me that I'm not entirely sure I have the verbiage to articulate. And maybe then I can communicate myself even better to people than I already do, you know? And whether or not I do articulate myself good is up for debate, depending on who you are and kind of what we're talking about. But I have a lot of optimism that this, whether I stay consistent with it or not, depending on how the first couple months go, is going to have a good impact on my art, whether it be just from the learning process or it becomes something that becomes kind of a permanent fixture in my art life, right? And we'll see where that goes in a couple of months, you know? I'm hoping that the end of November or maybe early December will be the first vlog for this kind of documentation, but I'm thinking that if good stuff comes out of it, I'll be able to show it sooner and just be like, this is where this idea came from. But we'll see. It might take a couple of months for me to even get in the flow of actually creating the thing and doing it correctly or appropriately. So we'll see what happens, but I'm really excited. I'm really excited to share and kind of document this process and see where it goes and kind of where it takes us. So, you know, I hope you guys are excited as well, and if you have any ideas on how you guys implement this into your art life, I'd really want to know, because I think that self-teaching, you have to kind of explore and find what does and doesn't work for you, and it can be a little bit harder to find the community aspect that allows you to better understand what exactly it is that you're seeking. I ultimately didn't really talk about my ghost girl as much as I wanted to, but I don't even really know that I had anything to say except that I wanted her to be showing a lot more of her mid-region, but didn't want to come up with a creative leotard for her, so I just kind of went with the middle ground. I'm thinking that I'm going to probably create like a 18 plus kind of section somewhere, be it a second Tumblr page or like an 18 plus Ko-fi, so that I can draw works that might be a little bit more on the risque end without risking people seeing things that they're not comfortable seeing. There's a level of artistic nudity in art that I think is very appropriate and very acceptable, and that's kind of just the passive art creation for non-lewd purposes, rather kind of narrative purposes or kind of things of that nature. But when you create art for the explicit desire of it having a sexual appeal, that's when I want to put it behind an 18 plus barrier, because that's not artistic nudity as much as it is kind of a form of erotica, and I want to be very, very careful about where I put that and things like that. But I'm also not sure that I'm going to create enough for it to be worth it that I share it anywhere. So, we'll see where it goes. But I do want to kind of explore the human form in a more sexual aspect eventually as well. Partially because I'm not entirely sure how my perception of the concept actually exists, and I feel like it's something that I need to explore artistically, because that's how I kind of explore everything in life, is by creating art and then seeing how I feel afterwards. So, if you have any ideas about that, I would like to know as well. Like, is Blue Sky a good place for this? I'm not sure. Alrighty, I think it's about time that I leave my kind of mental usage state and kind of enter my passive, non-thinking, nebulous state where my brain just doesn't do anything and I'm hardly existing like I usually am. So I've talked too much. I've used my brain too much. I must enter hibernation. So if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you let me know down below. Share it with people who you think might find this concept interesting. Save it for later if you're interested. All those fun things. Like if you like, dislike if you dislike. Subscribe if you would like to see more of my content, even if that includes just spooky leotard ghost women with pretty thighs. That's chill. I like that content too, I swear. And yeah, with all of this being said and done, I really appreciate you sitting all the way through to the end of this video, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, night, wherever you are, and that no art block curses you before we get to see each other again. Bye-bye!